Cocoa prices still on a tear this year. The costs primarily related to weather and crop disease in West Africa, which has led to major supply shortages. And this is weighing on some consumer-facing companies here like Hershey's, as higher chocolate costs will weigh on company profits. And you can see there, cocoa futures up over 80% year to date. So for more on the long-term and short-term future for cocoa prices, we're going to welcome in Ole Hansen. He is Saxo Bank's head of commodity strategy. It's great to have you here. So talk to me about the degree to which you anticipate cocoa prices continuing this run to the upside, because we have seen a little bit of volatility over the last couple of months, particularly since May. We've seen a couple of bottoms in cocoa prices. Do you anticipate any relief in the price anytime soon?
Well, good morning and greetings from Copenhagen. I think what we've seen right now is basically the market consolidating, but obviously at a much higher level than we have seen in previous years. It just highlights that even though when you look at commodities and you say the best cure for a high price is a high price because it incentivizes production and it lowers demand. So far, we haven't really seen those structures really unfold because the producers in question here is primarily West Africa, and it does take time for the economics, the farm gate prices to raise to levels where they can increase production. At the same time, it looks like global demand remains fairly robust. I suppose we will still buy our chocolate bar, even though we have to pay a few cents more for it.
Yeah, I mean, we need those little luxuries, Ole, so we got to get the chocolate. But all these things considered, and you're pointing out a key part of this industry, which is the end-use industries that are reliable in tracking cocoa prices here. So what does that mean in terms of pass-through for higher prices, and for how extended are you kind of calculating or running the math on your side that we could see higher prices for longer because of the cocoa price input?
Well, we just have to look at the forward prices in the futures market, and while we are currently settling in around just below $8,000 a ton in the front month's contract, which is December, that's basically above the long-term average, which was around 2,500. Then the next year, if we look into the next season crop, which is basically between October and March, the harvest, once we're through that, even though we have that harvest, the prices for May next year are still around something like $6,000. So it does indicate that we're looking potentially into 2026 before potentially we can get some of this under control. And that really is a combination of two things. First and foremost, that the farmers are receiving more for their product. They can spend more money on fertilizers and also pesticides, which is a key right now due to some diseases they have in some of the crops. But also that we see the weather continue to improve. And obviously the weather is a big if here, because we have seen a very troubled season on the southern hemisphere when it comes to food production. We've seen cocoa, obviously, as we talk about now, but coffee prices hitting record highs as well. So it is the weather that ultimately will determine whether we can get some more balance in the market. And that is really not for us to guess where that's going.
You know, it's so interesting. I was just about to bring that up too, because I mean, we're coming off of a year where in the US alone, we saw during 2023 a record number of billion-dollar weather events. And that directly passes through, especially as you start to think about other parts of the world that are producing crops and producing cocoa and trying to make sure that regardless of whether there is able to be steady production, how is production going to need to shift? How is the farming, the cultivation of cocoa going to need to change in order to not be so impacted by events and severe weather events that foreseeable future are continuing to worsen at this juncture?
Well, it is ultimately a question about location. And when we look at where the bulk of the world's cocoa beans are being produced, that is West Africa. It is close to the equator. It's where the temperature and the climate in recent years has been the best, most supportive for this kind of production. So you can't just move it to somewhere else. We're seeing a bit of a pickup in Central America, but not to the extent that it can replace what we're seeing in Africa. So right now it is mostly a question of having the means to support the farmers through among other things fertilizers, and then again just trying to be smart with how water is being consumed. But many of these farmers, their lots are probably the size of a couple of football fields, so they don't really have much in terms of selling power when they want to sell their product. So that's another issue. They really are dependent on what kind of price that the government is setting for them.